Welcome to, we don't have a name for this yet, or an official name for this yet. We will figure that out soon enough. But I'm Tim Verghese, joined today by Steve Marik. We're going to run this throughout the course of this football season once a week, just kind of talking about the upcoming game, recapping the game that's already happened, just touching on some football things, just kind of talking football, getting in on this week, for example, we're talking about the depth chart, we're previewing the UTEP game, expectations for that. Coming out of the UTEP game, we'll have some thoughts on the game, specifically anything notable that caught our eye, how it leads into the following week, which is Colorado, and so on and so forth. But we're hoping to use this as kind of like a kind of a middle ground to kind of just talk ball a little bit. So I'm excited to be here. Steve, how are we feeling about this whole thing?
Good. I'm feeling good about it. And yes, while we don't currently have an official name yet, maybe you stumbled upon something with football things with Tim and Steve because it's going to be a lot of football things here. So I'm excited to
Yes.
talk some ball with you.
Yeah, for sure. Same. And, kind of not recruiting focused at all, not really focused on anything but solely what's happening between the lines.
Hmm.
We'll get right into it, with episode one, as we kind of prep for game one. Nebraska takes on UTEP on Saturday at Memorial Stadium, kicks off the season for the first time in 5 years at home. And so I know there's some excitement about that, excitement to see what year two of the Matt Rule era looks like, year one of the Dylan Raiola era looks like. So we'll start there. We'll start with the depth chart. No real surprises at quarterback. Dylan's the starter.
Yeah.
Expectations are high. They're going to let him loose, going to let him throw around a little bit. I don't think we need to focus on that QB depth chart a whole lot. I think if anything, kind of talk about, it definitely seems like Heinrich Haarberg's going to be featured in this offense despite being the backup quarterback. And they're going to find some unique, creative ways to do it. Steve, in your background, kind of looking into Marcus Satterfield's background and Matt Rule's background, kind of what do you envision for like Heinrich Haarberg's role this season?
Well, I think, Marcus Satterfield and Matt Rule have both been very vocal about wanting to turn their offense into a positionless offense. He's talked about that many, many times before. And, Harburg definitely, I think, fits that mold because he's big. He's 6'5". He's nearly 230 pounds. He's one of the fastest guys on the team. We know what he can do with his legs. He's an improving passer. So whoever you talk to, whoever gets up there and talks at the podium during these press conference settings, they always say he's too good of an athlete to keep on the sideline holding a clipboard. And I totally understand that. And, I think the fan base is kind of torn on whether they want a quote unquote Heinrich Harburg package or not, because on one side of the fence, you have a group of fans who don't want to take the ball out of Dylan Raiola's hands, which I understand. And on the other side, you see some fans that are okay with maybe a Harburg package here and there, whether that's a short yardage type thing or a goal line package, where you can introduce some quarterback run elements that I don't think would be present with Dylan Raiola back there. Um, you know, in the recent past, in recent seasons, Nebraska's offense has heavily featured the quarterback run. Now with more of a pocket passer in Dylan Raiola, it's going to look a little different. I don't think he's going to be running a lot of QB run, a lot of QB power, QB counter, things like that. But I think that's exactly what Heinrich Haarberg can introduce to an offense and make opposing defenses prepare for during the week, which can be kind of like an added headache for opposing defensive coordinators. So, there's just a lot of options, and I think that's a good thing at the end of the day.
Yep, I agree. And I think my personal take, at least is with Harburg specific, I think he's too good of an athlete to leave off the field. Like you need to find a way to feature him in the offense. And more than that, I think from a coaching standpoint, with some of these teams you're going to see on the schedule, it gives defenses like a different look and something that they'll have to account
Absolutely.
for
Yep.
every single week. Is just like, okay, whenever 10's on the field, we respond like this, or we have to line up like
Hmm.
this. And that also gives Nebraska an opportunity to like, okay, and like, Matt Rule mentioned in his press conference, there's going to be some moments, or at least Mark Satterfield mentioned in his press conference, there's going to be some moments where Dylan Raiola and Heinrich Haarberg are on the field at the same time. Like that is something defenses are going to have to prep for, something
Hmm.
they're not going to be used to, something they can't even really replicate, in their own practices because, how many teams have a running weapon like Heinrich
Hmm.
or a quarterback like Dylan, like I
Hmm.
don't think you can find there's no easy way to prep for that necessarily. And so I think it's a way for Nebraska to kind of have a bit of a competitive advantage just in the sense of whenever he's on the field, you kind of have to expect a
Yeah.
completely different thing than when it's solely just dealing out there.
Yeah, and one last thing before we move on here. I totally agree with you. I love the idea of giving an opposing defensive coordinator something else to teach his guys during the week, 'cause that's just something else. And with the quarterback run game, that's introducing another gap that defenses have to account for in that run game. Sometimes defenses are good at that in adjusting. Sometimes defenses aren't good at that. And it doesn't always have to be with Heinrich in the backfield to like taking direct snaps. We saw in last season's season opener at Minnesota, Heinrich was an offline tight end and he ran a little sneak route out to the flat. He caught a first down from Jeff Sims. So this is not going to be a completely foreign concept for Heinrich Harburg. He's the guy who's been a quarterback most of his life, but in college last season he was getting some reps as kind of an offline H back / tight end. So yeah, we can move on, but it's going to be really fun and interesting to see how Marcus Satterfield and Matt Rule tackle this Heinrich Harburg situation.
Yeah, we'll get, I think, our first look at it on Saturday. I don't expect, we'll dive into the UTEP game later, but I don't expect a whole lot of, that they say they're not going to ease Dylan into it, but I think that's more so just they're going to run their playbook, but I don't think they're going to show a whole lot of these creative, unique plays because they're saving that for Colorado and then down the line into Big Ten play, when you've got opponents like USC and Ohio State and
Mm-hmm.
those type of teams, Wisconsin on the roster down the line. So I don't think you want to, throw everything, put everything on film against UTEP. I think you just want to show a little bit, and I think you're going to see some Heinrich usage for sure. But what
Mm-hmm.
that looks like, I think we're both curious to see. Looking at the running backs, wide receivers, just on this initial depth chart. You and I had this conversation off camera. And something we've kind of been saying all off season, because I understand this like this feeling or just this like comfort in knowing who the starter is,
Mm-hmm.
and like people still are like, okay, who's the starter? But like with this team, with this current staff, it doesn't matter. It never
No.
matters. Like
Mm-mm.
everyone's gonna play, currently on the depth chart, we just talked about this, but like Jalen Lloyd's listed as an outside receiver, but we're gonna see him in the slot, just because he's not
Yeah.
listed in the slot doesn't mean he's not gonna line up there. Same way, Jaren Bonner's listed as a starter in the slot. He's going to rotate with Carter Nelson. He's going to rotate with IGC.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're even going to see some Banks and Neo in the slot. You're going to see some Fedoni in the slot. Like you're going to see guys line up all over the place. I don't think necessarily the order matters, but I think the people featured both in that running back room and featured in that wide receiver room are important. Kind of looking at that at both depth charts, kind of what stuck out to you.
So yeah, for the receivers, really not much. I mean, obviously the slot receiver with Janiron Bonner, that might have surprised some people just because I think the notion that a lot of fans probably had was, oh, Jalen Lloyd, he's smaller receiver, just put him in the slot. And like you said, Tim, he's going to be playing in the slot plenty this season. But I think with Janiron Bonner, it's really intriguing. I know the staff last year played around with how they used him and kind of that hybrid fullback role. But this year he's more of a receiver. He's going to be operating out of the slot. And what I like most about him and what the staff obviously likes about him is why they're doing it is because he's 6'2". He's around 220 pounds. He knows how to run routes. He's a wide receiver at heart, but he's just in a bigger body. But what that allows an offense to do is, if he's out there, let's just say it's 11 personnel, and Thomas Fedoni is the one tight end, and there's three receivers out there, and Janiron Bonner is one of them. It can look like to a defense that matches its personnel based off what Nebraska shows as 11 personnel on one play. On the next play, let's say Janiron Bonner shifts into the backfield and is acting almost like a fullback or an H back, and all of a sudden it turns into like 21 personnel. That's when you start getting mismatches. That's when you all of a sudden have a pass look with 11 personnel on one play, and then the next play it looks like 21, and they're running downhill at you with Janiron Bonner as kind of a lead blocker. I think that's where the benefit of having somebody like Janiron Bonner comes into play. And I'm excited to see if it works out like that. I think that's the plan with them. But yeah, outside of that, Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, IGC, right behind Bonner in the depth chart at slot. that's interesting too. We know about his off-season gains in the weight room. He's up to 200 pounds right now. He's kept that speed. At least he says he has. So, and maybe it's kind of like the same version with Janiran Bonner, where he can do a little receiving and a little blocking from the slot too. Put him closer to the line to the core of the offensive line and have him do some blocking too. Maybe that's in his future at Nebraska in this season too. I know he came to the program as kind of the deep threat with his speed being the top trait he has, but maybe he's evolved since then, and maybe the coaches have a different plan for him now.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like a just completely different player than
He does,
the
yeah.
one that
He's
came on
bigger.
campus. So I'm very curious to see what that looks like, having missed a whole season,
Hmm.
kind of featuring in this offense and where he kind of factors in compared to, again, like where Bonner stands, where Carter Nelson stands, because I think you and I both expect Nelson's snaps to increase, as the season goes
As the
on and
season goes on, once he gets more
I guess
comfortable
more
with this whole
comfortable.
college football thing.
So that's like I'm very curious to see kind of how that all shakes out. But again, I
Hmm.
if I was a fan, I wouldn't get too worked up on where people are currently in the depth chart,
Hmm.
or what that depth chart kind of currently looks like. It's going to shift constantly. Like Malachi Coleman's a third string. That doesn't mean they're going to see plenty of Malachi Coleman this year, I think. And I wouldn't get too worked up on where people stand, specifically at the skill positions where they stand in the depth chart. Looking at the O line, I think this is a position that has a lot of questions, specifically in the outside. I think the interior of the line is one of the strengths of the team, not just the offense. I think it's one of the best units they have.
Hmm.
Specifically looking at the Ben Scott and Micah Mazuka, like that combination, I think you're going to see a lot of runs behind those two guys, whether that's QB
Yeah.
runs, whether that's Dante Dowdle or Gabe Irvin downhill just behind those two. I think you see those two kind of team up for a lot in this season. I think the running game kind of runs behind those two.
I just close my eyes and I can just picture Ben Scott and Micah Mazuka double teaming like a 2-eye or something, and then he climbs to the second level and gets a linebacker. One of them does. That just like speaks to me. I just am very excited to see all that. I'm with you, Tim. I love the interior of this line and the depth there. I think Justin Evans is really important because of what he could provide as a backup center if anything ever happens to Ben Scott. And I think Justin Evans is hard to get under for defensive linemen. So I think he's a good guard, a good run blocking guard that does good things and provides versatility in case anything happens to your leader up front and Ben Scott. Micah Mizuka, he's an NFL player, man. That guy is a dog. I'm really excited to see, if everything works out with him, if his head is on straight, if he continues to do what he has shown to do, meet the standards of rules program. I think the sky's the limit for this guy. I think he's but has a potential to be one of the offensive linemen to be drafted. And I think there's multiple guys that could be drafted on Nebraska's offensive line in this upcoming draft, which is crazy to think about considering what this unit was looking like 2 years ago. But yeah, Tim, we got to talk about the edges, left tackle, right tackle. Look, I think everybody is on board with Bryce Benhart. He showed a lot of good things last year. But left tackle Turner Corcoran, the fan base is kind of iffy on him, and rightly so because of his production. We've all seen it. He's had his ups and downs at Nebraska, a lot of downs lately. But he's coming off injury. But then behind those two spots, left tackle and right tackle, there's not a lot of experience, and that's kind of a huge question mark in my mind with Grant Seagren showing up behind Turner Corcoran at left tackle. Grant Seagren is a 6'6", 305-pound redshirt freshman who has not played a down of college football yet. He's from small town Nebraska, Oakland Craig High School, and then at right tackle, Gunnery Gatula, who is nursing a ankle injury, according to Matt Rule. And his status for Saturday's UTEP game is actually up in the air right now. So there's a lot of questions behind the tackle spots right now.
Yeah, and I think that's again like as confident as them in the interior of the line. I think one of the biggest
Mm-hmm.
questions on the team as we with days out from game day is those tackle spots. I think you feel good about specifically that right side with Benard if he can kind of pick up where he left off last year,
Yep.
and even
Yep.
if he does go down, I think there's some faith in what Gunnar Gatula can be long term for
Mm-hmm.
this team. Early on, obviously won't be just young, getting his feet under him. There may be some learning moments, some growing pains, but you feel good about his long term potential. But yeah, I think the left tackle spot's a big question mark. Losing Teddy right before the season's real tough. You really hope you could have had him at least just as a depth piece, even if he's not starting. Have
Hmm.
him as a depth piece. Here's something I guess looking at this again and kind of factoring in where he kind of sits right now. When he's back, because he's also working through something right now. When he's back, with Henry Lutovsky, do you see him kind of potentially challenging Justin Evans for that left guard spot? Or even potentially, like at his size at 6'6", can he move outside?
I actually don't think that he's going to challenge Justin Evans for the left guard spot. Nothing against Henry Lutovsky. He's been a really good guy to have around because of his just he's had some spot starts in his career. But it seems like a lot of times when I've watched him specifically on games, there's a lot of missed assignments. There's a lot of just I think he's got some better football in him, and he hasn't showed it yet. So I don't think that Henry Lutovsky is going to challenge for a guard spot. And mostly I've only seen him on the right side, and then he shows up in the two deep on the left side, right behind Justin
Yeah.
Evans. So the way Donovan Raiola, the offensive line coach, coaches his guys, everybody's playing everybody. Like everybody's playing everywhere. They flip flop all the time just so in case something happens during the game and you need Micah Mazuka goes down, maybe Justin Evans can or Henry Lutovsky is backing up Justin Evans on the left side. He can quick do a spot starter or take some reps on the right side at right guard too. And we saw that kind of same thing with some of the young tackles too, Gunnar Gatula and Grant Segrin. They were battling for the left tackle spot. It was really only left tackle mentioned with those two. Then all of a sudden, Gunnar Gatula shows up behind Bryce Benhart on the right side. That might surprise some people, but not if you listen to Donovan Raiola because he loves to flip flop those guys at practice and make sure everybody kind of understands and is comfortable playing on the opposite side of it. And the players talk about that too. So that's something that I like about Donovan Raiola as an O-line coach. But Henry Lutovsky, he's definitely a really good guy to have around just because of in case somebody goes down at guard, he's probably the top option right now. But challenging Justin Evans or Micah Mazuka, I don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if anything, like you said, I don't think challenging necessarily for starting spot, but like more of in the vein of just like when they rotate. I think he's one of the first off the bench. I think Gatula is one of the first off the bench.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll find ways to get those guys some snaps. Flipping over
And
to
then
defensive side of
also,
the ball. Go
also we
ahead.
should Tyler Canuck too, the former
Yep.
transfer from Utah. I think the staff likes him. He came
Yep.
in as a tackle. Now he's working at guard primarily. I
And like you
think
just mentioned, I think he's a guy that can go outside and in or inside and
absolutely,
out
yeah.
regardless. Like he's, I
Just
think,
what
one of
I
the more
was, yeah.
versatile guys on the line.
Just what we were talking about the diversity of these guys and just the flexibility. Tyler Canuck is another guy who's played some tackle. Now he's getting some guard action, so he's another one that is going to be useful to have. And while he hasn't played a lot in college football yet, starts wise, I think he's going to be pretty valuable in the future at Nebraska. I think they really like him.
For sure. Again, flipping over to the other side of the ball, no real surprises, I think, on the D line. You've got your leaders, Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, Jamari Butler at starters. I guess behind them, some of the names, Riley Van Poppel, Kai Wallen, Elijah Judy, Vincent Jackson, Cam Leonard, James Williams. Any surprises in that? Anyone you're surprised isn't listed there? Anyone you're surprised is listed there?
So Ty Robinson, obviously, no. Riley Van Poppel, no, not surprised. Kai Wallen, no, not surprised. I think they like him. He just needed a redshirt year, and I think he's a piece for the future. Nash Hutmacher, obviously, is all Big Ten caliber. Elijah Judy, no. I mean, not surprising. He was kind of a key piece to their pass rushing packages last season in his first season in a Husker uniform. Um, Jamari Butler, no. Huge team leader. Cameron Lenhart, got a black shirt, not surprising. James Williams, we all know about him. Not surprising. If I had to pick anybody, maybe Vincent Jackson instead of Sua Lefotu at nose tackle. Vincent Jackson has all the talent in the world. I think he's just like very, very raw and just needs game snaps. But seeing him instead of Sua Lefotu, another redshirt freshman, from California, that maybe qualifies as a surprise, but it's not a big deal to me. I think both guys are just young guys and working to get better, and I think they're going to be good pieces for the future with both Vincent Jackson and Sua Lefotu.
Mhm. And again, like we've all mentioned for every position so far, a guy not listed doesn't mean much on
Yeah.
whether or not you're going to see him. I'm sure we're going to see Sua. Keona
Hmm.
Davis isn't listed here. I think that's a bit of a surprise, but also like you're going to see Keona Davis line up somewhere on the D line. Something interesting with Vincent Jackson. I think I mentioned it in one of our open practice observations. I might not have because I think you and I talked about it on the sideline, watching
Hmm.
the D line go through drills, and I remember there was specifically a rep where it was Keona Davis and David Hofkin,
Yeah.
the from
Two new
Germany.
guys.
Yeah, they're
Hmm.
going on. They're on the bags, and they did the rep, and the coach whistled for the next rep, and then Vincent steps out of line. And he's like, "No, go back, do that again." Like
Yeah, I
as a
remember. Yeah.
redshirt freshman,
Hmm.
a second year freshman, he's the one that's stepping out and telling the freshman, "Hey, this is how you do it. This is how you do it." I think it says a lot about the coach's faith in him to like just one like that he has a confidence to step out and say that sounds. It seems like that's something that has been going on behind the scenes in practice, and it says a lot about his maturity, where he is at, and kind of his understanding of the game. I think this is a guy that just from that interaction, just the way he composes himself, the way the coaching staff talks about him. This is a future coach in the making, depending on how football works out, his own playing career works out for him. I think this is a guy that has some coaching potentially in his future.
And I think Vincent Jackson was kind of a late bloomer in high school too. I don't think he played all 4 years, of his high school career.
Oh yeah, I mean his
I
late. I
don't
mean
think he
again, like
did. Yeah.
he was headed for Syracuse to play with Tony White until
Hmm.
Nebraska came and got Tony White, and then also went and got him. This
Hmm.
is a guy that was just going to stick in the Northeast and kind of played a
Yeah.
lower level type program. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
now he's up here at the Big Ten, working in the I guess the three deep in in
Hmm.
year two.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, looking at the linebacker room again, I don't think a whole lot of surprises here. Is there anything here that like really surprises you? It was just like these are the vets, these are the guys we expected out here.
All four of them. It's who we expected, especially for the inside guys and the jack linebackers too. John Bullock, not a surprise. Vincent Shavers, we've heard his name all spring and all fall. Not a surprise. Makai Bear, again, not a surprise. He had a breakout season last year. Stephon Thompson, again, I don't think he had the smoothest of transitions coming from Syracuse, but not many guys do. When you kind of first get a first taste of Matt Rule's programs and the standards that you have to meet, it's probably a shock to a lot of guys when they first encounter it. But again, not a surprise. He knows Tony White's defense like the back of his hand. He's played in it. He's been an inside linebacker. He's been a jack linebacker in Tony White's system. So again, not a surprise. Jack linebacker. If you want to make something of there not being an or on there, I mean, I'm not personally, but maybe some people are because they maybe think Prince Will Umamielen should be starting over MJ Sherman. Again, it's nothing to make a big deal about because both those guys are going to play. They should be co-starters. I just think that MJ Sherman and Principal Umamielen, they're two solid jack linebackers for what Tony White needs out of that position. So they'll both play an even amount of reps.
Yep, I agree. With the jack position specifically, what I'm kind of fascinated by is I think, and you go back and watch MJ Sherman's high school tape,
Mm,
and you go back and watch kind of what he did at Georgia, and you watch what happened last year. I think there's a lot of good football left in that body
sure.
and good football left in that frame that
Hmm.
we haven't seen in a couple of years. Like you go
He,
back and watch,
mhm.
like, because he was always like, this isn't something new that he's like all of a sudden like somewhat of an undersized edge. Like he was an undersized edge coming out,
Yep.
but he made his name off of his ability both in the run game and as a pass rusher. He's
Yeah.
got some pass rush moves, and I think you look at
Hmm.
specifically what he did last year. It felt like times he was just trying to get his feet wet and get comfortable in the defense. I think you're going to
Hmm.
see him when he has that opportunity to kind of pin his ears back, when he's moving faster, when he seems more comfortable on and off the field. I mean, we saw him in the press conference, like over the years, he's getting more and more comfortable
He's
up.
way more
Just
comfortable talking to us, and that's
yes,
cool to see because he says some good stuff.
yeah, and that's like, and I think this is just a personal belief, but like I do think like your confidence in front of the camera on in press conferences has some type of relationship with the confidence you're playing with on the field as well.
Absolutely.
And you see guys that like as they get more comfortable on the field, they become better in front of the media, or they
Hmm.
become better just kind of talking about their own game and talking
Hmm.
about where they stand in the depth chart and talking about their teammates. I think you're going to see that from MJ this year, and I think again, like I would recommend people go back and watch that high school tape and see kind of the things he's doing to get around defender, or getting around offensive linemen, and getting into the backfield, and then kind of watch and see what he did last year and what this could look like. Because Jack is such an interesting spot for this team
Yeah.
because MJ is a very different player than Prince Will. Like Prince
They're
Will is
two
your
different.
traditional edge, like a long, lengthy edge that
Yep.
you can put, and you can have him standing up, you can have him with his hand in the dirt.
Hmm.
MJ, for because of kind of his frame and kind of some of the limitations he does have, that's a guy
He's
you want
shorter.
kind of standing up off the edge. He's got the
Yep.
power and
Hmm.
the size, the leverage to kind of get his hand underneath, to put his hand in the dirt and kind of win around the edge with that leverage,
Hmm.
but he lacks that length. He lacks that length that Prince Will
Yes.
has that gives Prince Will a little more versatility. I think there's going to be certain packages where you see, okay, it's going to be Nash and Tyre in the interior, and then the
Yep.
two edges are, him
Hmm.
and Jamari, or like Prince Will and MJ, or Prince Will and Jamari, and like you know what I mean. I think that they find ways to get some of these best pass rush packages out there because I think what MJ gives you as a run defender is better than what Prince Will currently does, and that'll come
Absolutely.
with time. Prince Will just being young is
Yeah. He's just
and
a
that'll just
kid.
come. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. He's a pup.
Hmm.
He's a like truly
Hmm.
like just a pup out there. So I'm very excited to see Prince Will this year. I was
Hmm.
a huge fan of his coming out of high school. Before
Yeah.
I was on this beat. He was one of those guys that I was like banging the table. I was like, why is no one offering him? Why is he like still available? It's midway senior year, and you're saying this like twitched up 6'4" edge rusher just flying down. You know what I mean? It's like what?
Hmm.
Why? Like his older brother's like a
Yeah.
notable high school, a college football player. Like
Hmm.
you would think people would be intrigued by the bloodline, but
Hmm.
For Nebraska's benefit, we're able to swoop in and get him late when Matt Rule showed up.
Yeah, I can't shout this from the rooftop loud enough. When you look at MJ Sherman's career, 3 years I think at Georgia, and mostly a special teams player. He didn't play a lot of defense, only in blowouts. So he gets his opportunity in the Big Ten at Nebraska, and last year is his first year, and he doesn't really meet a lot of the expectations in the fan base because of the low sack numbers and tackle for loss numbers. But if you think about it, that was really his first season of true time playing defense on there. So, with it being his second defense now, or his second season now, I just think, like you said, Tim, he looks so much more comfortable talking in front of the media, and he's very
He's
comfortable. And
faster in practice. I mean, even the
yeah,
observations you've seen, he's moving around like he's
sure.
moving around like a guy that knows what he's doing now, like moving
Hmm.
around like he's comfortable within the system.
Yeah.
We're not going to take up too much longer. Did
Yeah.
want to touch on the DBs before
Hmm.
we dive into a quick UTEP preview. I
Hmm.
think the notable things here, the starters are who we expected.
Yep.
Buford at the cornerback spot opposite Tommy Hill, Isaac
Mhm.
Gifford, Malcolm Hartzog, Deshaun Singleton are the starting safeties. The backups are fascinating just
Yeah.
because of specifically its safety. I think if you look at the corner spots, Amari Sanders, he's earned praise all offseason or all fall camp, for what
Yep.
he's done since he's come in. He's the backup at the cornerback spot. Sierra Wright, Bly Hill behind Marcus Buford on the other side. I think you see that spot get a lot more rotation than I think Tommy Hill is going to be like he's going to be on the field as much as they can get
He's
him
that
out there.
anchor. He's that
Yep.
anchor.
Yep. And
Hmm.
so on the other side, though, I think you see some rotations between Buford, Wright, Hill. I think you fit in Sanders somewhere in there. I think you fit in Jeremiah Charles in there somewhere because that was a guy that's gotten praise all offseason, but didn't show up on the two deep. The safety backup spots, I do want to ask you about this. Kobe Brett's, Derek Branch. We don't know a whole lot about Derek Branch. We do know something about Kobe Brett's. Kind of what does it say about Brett's is just time here that he is here?
I think he's just been moving around. And last season he was backup rover. I mean, he saw some game snaps against Michigan. And I think he's a junior right now. I think he's entering his fourth year if I'm not mistaken. But he's just been moved around from safety, and he lost some weight. He's not like 210 or 215 pounds now. He's 6'2", 205. Tony White has mentioned that he's been flying around. He feels more comfortable. Sometimes it just takes some time for kids to find their own groove, their own pace at this whole college football thing. And so, yeah, maybe he's finding that right now, and he's going to be backing up Deshaun Singleton, probably in that boundary safety role, where you need to be a downhill run stopper in that position. And I think that kind of fits what Kobe Bretts does. And Derek Branch, again, we don't know about him, just a walk on, but he's been here for a long time, and I think he just hasn't been mentioned at all, and all of a sudden he shows up behind Malcolm Hartzog and in that depth chart. But like we said, there's always Marquise Buford there. He's going to be rotating between corner and safety probably. So he's your wild card of the DBs back there. You can do a little bit of everything. And I'm really kind of interested in that rover spot. Ramir Stewart showing up out of the blue.
Hmm.
Matt Rule said that Ramir Stewart, redshirt freshman out of Philly, was not part of the initial 120 man roster once fall camp started. So now he's all of a sudden here. And Rule said when he's at his correct weight, he is an excellent safety, and that correct weight, according to Matt Rule, is 205 pounds. And we saw Ramir Stewart, physical guy, downhill safety. I mean, he will come up and hit you, maybe hit you too much if you're Thomas Fedoni running for a touchdown in the spring game. I really didn't appreciate that from Ramir Stewart, and I don't think the coaches did either. Taking out your starting tight end, Mackey Award list watch list guy, but yeah. So Ramir Stewart showing up behind Isaac Gifford, that really intrigues me just because I don't think his name has been dropped once, maybe in spring ball or definitely not in fall camp until he showed up at the depth chart. So really interesting defensive backfield. Not a lot of surprises, but that depth is going to be one to watch. That second team DB unit, is probably going to play a factor against UTEP because of how fast those guys want to go. Scotty Walden's crew. So, Tim, any more thoughts on those guys?
Man, not really. I'm just kind of interested to see, kind of before we get out of here, kind of want to touch on UTEP, but I am curious to see how many DBs we see this week and then 2 weeks from now against Northern Iowa, just how many of
Could be
those
a
guys
lot.
rotate in there. And
Yeah.
those PFF snap counts after the game are going to be fun to look at because that's always a treat for me with this team.
Hmm.
Yeah, before we get out of here, just wanted to quickly, we haven't seen a whole lot on the field, so I don't think there's a whole lot to really dive into. UTEP is just such an unknown right now. First year
Hmm.
head coach, a ton of transfers. Nebraska's kind of talked about their prep for this as having to watch multiple games, and that's just like not even unfortunately, but that's kind of just this where we are at with college football right now. Is Nebraska's watching Austin PA film, they're watching UTEP film, they're watching two, three other schools, because just this program got transfers from everywhere. They've got a whole lot of new. There's some guys that are probably going to play a good bit on Saturday for UTEP that have just never seen college football before. There's no film out there on them. So there's a lot of Nebraska kind of going in, flying a little blind.
Hmm.
They will be, but they have to get used to that. Same thing with Colorado. Colorado's completely redone that roster, so you're flying blind again. You're going to have to watch a bunch of different film there as well. Northern Iowa is going to be the exact same way. Like that's just unfortunately like where we're at with the sport. I don't mean fortunately, unfortunately, but just where we're at with the sport is you have to do things like that. Just quickly, I think for you, what are you looking for on Saturday? What are like the I guess top three things you want to see either answered or just you're curious to see on Saturday?
Well, the good thing about Nebraska's tackle situation is they're going to get a good test. I think Maurice Westmoreland, he plays a bandit position, which is the UTEP's edge position. He's 6'2", 250 pounds, and I asked Matt Rule about Maurice Westmoreland, and Rule said that he's an NFL guy, and I totally see it. He led the team in sacks or I think he was second on the team in sacks last season. He was first in TFL's 6'2", 250 guy, 250 pounds. He is fast. He is twitchy. He can beat you outside, and he has a really good inside move too, which Rule said sometimes you don't see a lot with some of those edge guys, like beating good tackles inside. So I'm really interested in seeing how UTEP tries to manufacture one-on-one opportunities with their top edge guy, Maurice Westmoreland, against Nebraska's tackles, whether that's Bryce Benhart or Turner Corcoran. So with Turner's past performances against Big Ten edge rushers, maybe UTEP tries to match up Maurice Westmoreland on Turner Corcoran. So that's something that I'm going to be definitely watching on Saturday, and I think it's going to be a good test for Turner and Bryce Benhart.
Yep, completely agree. And I'm just curious to see kind of what we see offensively, what we kind of see from Dylan, kind of what they show, what they put on film, and as a group, I think both sides of the ball, just like what progress do we see? I want to see, this defense wants to be the best defense in the country. What
Mhm.
does that look like? How do you build upon what you did last year?
Mhm.
And yeah, I just think there's a lot of questions, a lot. I think that is unknown with this team. We'll have plenty more to talk about next week. We spent a whole lot of most of this time on the depth chart, but
Mhm.
based on what we've seen in practice. But I'm just excited to see this team hit other people and make some observations based on that. And again, next week's Colorado week, so we'll have a lot to get into. Before we get out of here, any final thoughts? Anything else to look for on Saturday?
Yeah, just, offensively with Nebraska, they're going to want to establish the run, a traditional handoff run game. And once they have that going, if they have that going, that's when Dylan Raiola and that play action pass and that big right arm of his could make an appearance. And then on the flip side with Tony White's defense, look, Scotty Walden, he's going to be calling the plays for UTEP's offense. They're going to want to go fast. They're going to want to snap the ball with around 35, 30, 34 seconds on the play clock. And they're just going to try to, out condition Nebraska's defense and potentially make it a game that is won and lost on the edges with a lot of receiver screens and kind of quick game things. That's what Scotty Walden did a lot at Austin, PA. And I think that's what he's going to do, especially with a brand new team with so many new faces and first game of the Scotty Walden era in El Paso. I think they're going to try to go as fast as they can and hopefully catch Nebraska out of position defensively and see if their receivers can beat Nebraska's DBs in one-on-one situations. I think we're going to see that a lot on Saturday.
For sure. That'll do it for us. We will see you all next week, and yep, we will definitely see you on Saturday.